Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this, our third section of Kinship Care Week in 2023. I'd like to welcome Anne Wilson and Sarah Nelson of Children's Health Scotland. And Anne and Sarah are going to lead this session this morning on looking after yourself. So I'll pass you over to Anne and Sarah.
Thank you, Susan. We're just delighted to be here. My name's Anne Wilson. I'm Head of Development, but I have responsibility for the Care Experience service that we run, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself as well.
Hello, my name's Sarah Nelson. I'm the assistant for our Care Experience service at Children's Health Scotland. So I assist Anne with short webinars like this, our longer workshops and one-to-one support on health-related matters.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, and it's lovely to see some people from our workshops. I mean, I recognise names and faces. Well, I did recognise faces till everyone went off camera, but I completely respect that. But we do hope that we'll see you again when we turn off the recording facility at the end and we have a discussion slash Q&A session. The recording is incredibly useful, as Susan said, because it preserves the webinar as it now is for all time as it goes up on the website, so that, you know, lots and lots of kinship carers like yourselves can benefit from it. So we'll just get started, and Sarah, if you could share the first slide.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to see if I can adjust my screen a tad. So that even I can see everybody where they should be, I think. Okay, so this session is called Looking After Yourself for Kinship Carers. Now, we debated long and hard about calling it self-care, but we think that, like many things, has become a kind of overused, rather cliched expression. And we consulted, and people seem to prefer the title Looking After Yourself, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're looking after the young people, but the impact of looking after children and young people, particularly coming from a care experience background, requires you in turn to look after yourself. And we'll talk much more about that later on. This session came from previous Kinship Care Week sessions that we had done. Last year, we did calming techniques for carers and children and young people, and that was in direct response to kinship carers who had attended the previous year's Understanding Trauma and Supporting Recovery, and their question at the end of that was, great, I get it now, I get the whole trauma bit in the brain, but so what do I do next? So with that in mind, we developed calming techniques. And then we learned, and we've learned really over time, but particularly in the last year or so, that one thing that was uppermost in kinship carers' minds was the business of having the time and space to look after themselves, and how and when to do that, and the barriers to it. So the way we've configured this webinar is that we made the recordings of the discussions with a group of kinship carers, 4 kinship carers and ourselves. We made those separately because we thought it was putting far too much pressure on people to speak to camera on the day. So we've made them as special sort of standalone discussions, which it was then possible to ask the kinship carers to edit. But I would have to say that they were so eloquent when we did the first take that we did not have to make much of an edit at all. We just tidied up the edges and brought it more, no pauses and things like that. And then we've further broken it down into 3 video clips in answer to the questions, what is self-care? What are the benefits? And what would your take-home messages be, or your advice to kinship carers? So those are the 3 section parts. So Sarah, next slide, please. Now, you'll see here, I will be all right if the kids are. And this was a quotation that was given by a kinship carer. And this goes right back to 2 years ago when KCAS invited David Trickey, who is one of the principal psychologists from the UK Trauma Council, and I would counsel you to go onto their website or onto YouTube and follow him. He's absolutely terrific. Now, he picked up this quotation in his presentation 2 years ago, and he said, right, let's look at I will be all right if the kids are. And he said, you have to turn this on your head. And what you actually have to say is, if I am all right, the kids will be. So you're turning it on its head. And because we know that children and young people pick up on adults' mood and stress, and they do this even in a regular setting, never mind when they have been through the adversity that some of your children, or indeed many or all of your children, will have experienced in their lives. So there is this need for you to mirror to them the way you want them to be. Now, that's really hard to do, because that's it asking you to stay calm and to stay regulated in the face of sometimes tremendous can I say meltdowns or dysregulation on the part of the child. And we did talk about that in our previous webinars. So if you can do that, it will, and you will hear the carers talking about this on the video clips, it will have a beneficial effect on your children. Now, again, here comes a cliche, but it is a little bit like putting on your own oxygen mask before you can help other people. If you're not breathing, or if you're short of oxygen, there is no way that you can help others. And, you know, another phrase that we're probably well familiar with is, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you've got to continually, if you can, boost and recharge your own batteries. Now, we're just using a bunch of cliches, but it is a way of trying to describe what we're going to be looking at in greater detail as we go through today. So there's one more slide before we start on the first video clip. And that is, what is self-care? So what do we mean by looking after yourself? And it's quite a tricky one, because we know that carers are wired to care. You wouldn't be doing this if you couldn't care. And sometimes it's hard to lay that aside. And sometimes you think, well, I only get the gratification or the satisfaction from caring if I'm caring for other people. I don't get that if I'm caring for myself. But actually, the neuroscience now shows, and we're always going on about neuroscience, but that's because we can, through MRI scans and fMRI scans, we can look inside the brain and we can see the parts of the brain that light up. And so we now know that caring for yourself and looking after yourself does have a beneficial effect. And again, if it's going to benefit you, that will in turn benefit the children, because you're a different person when you're relaxed, when you're open, and when you're able to be attuned with the children in your care. You can't do that if you're stressed. So when you take care of yourself and you're not stressed, you're better able to meet the needs of your children and young people. But the carers put this so much better than I can. They're not talking the theory, they are talking the lived experience. And the next slide, as Sarah Sarah will introduce that, tells you what they think.
Yes, and you're now going to hear our group of kinship carers talking very eloquently about what self-care means to them. Yes.
Put myself on.
What does self-care mean to you? And I'll go to Lorna first.
For me, self-care is about checking in that I'm okay. Before I became a kinship carer, I would go for a save up, and once every 6 weeks, I would go for a massage. And that was time for me to relax. I knew I had something to look forward to. It was something just for me. Since becoming a kinship carer, I no longer have the money for that. I no longer have the time for that, to give up for that. So I practice meditation quite a lot. I also do some sessions for other carers to sort of help them practice meditation. And it just helps me check in with how I'm feeling and how my body's feeling. It's also about putting my physical health first. When I first took on my little one, I was actually going through chemotherapy at the time for breast cancer. And last year I was diagnosed with a different cancer. But see the amount of times that I had put off a doctor's appointment, delayed a hospital appointment, not even phoned the doctor because it didn't seem that important. And getting the cancer again last year, which I'm fine, by the way, reminded me that I can't do that. I can't do that. I have to put my own physical health first. I just have to, or who's there for the kids? It's about trying to put yourself first every now and again, and just checking in with yourself that you're okay. That's what it means to me.
I think it's lovely, if I can just come in there, Lorna, that you started off saying, you know, I can't have what I had before, you know, in terms of the massage or the facial, because I haven't got the time and I haven't got the money, because that would be away from the kids, and, you know, money's going elsewhere now. Yeah. But I think it's wonderful that you actually find something that you could do that doesn't cost and is something that you can do within the limits of the time that you've got. I think that just shows the range of possibilities.
So first thing in the morning, I sit up, I put my feet on the floor, and I do 10 reflective breaths so that I can check in that I'm okay to start the day and I'm able to deal with it. And it's helped me immensely. It really just, it really helps. It really helps. It helps me be calm for the kids. It helps me be more mindful of their needs. So although I'm taking it as time for me, the whole point of it is to make things better for them. You know, so I suppose it's not 100% self-care.
No, but you've hit the nail on the head, because earlier in the session we were looking at the business of not just I'll be all right if the kids are all right, but swinging that onto its head and saying, well, if I'm all right, then they will be, because it's that sort of regulating yourself and they'll pick up on that.
So what does self-care mean to you then, Alana?
Much like what Lorna was saying there, I think a lot of the things you said really hit the nail on the head. I'm probably guilty to not taking the self-care time that is required, maybe on the mindfulness. So I'll certainly reach out and see how I can benefit from that as well. But basically myself and my partner, we're both kind of working full time when we took my niece in straight from birth, and obviously weren't afforded any leave as it's not recognised through government. So we kind of had to try and balance work and a newborn child, essentially. So it was really, really testing times. My work were absolutely brilliant. Being quite a major bank, they gave me the opportunity to work an agile pattern in quite a crazy job that I was a lot of responsibility. And through that, I think we just kind of muddled through. I don't think we really paid attention to really self-care in that respect. And mentally, it did impact me when I was 6 months postpartum with our wee guy. And we had to decide whether we take her full sibling, also from birth, knowing exactly what we went through the first time, the impact that it has mentally, physically, financially, and as well as the lack of support that was there. And I don't just mean kind of lack of support on the logistical element of kinship care, but I mean even just in the mental respect, there was nothing offered. You know, through having our own wee guy and go through fertility clinic, we were made to do counselling before we really even started because they wanted to make sure you were of sound mind. So it was really quite stark contrast when kind of just thrown into this completely different world that nobody knows of until you're in it or you make them aware of it. Like I say, when it hit that point, I was 6 months postpartum, I really struggled mentally. But I was really fortunate that the company I work for had access to mental health charities such as the Lydium, and also partners with Mental Health UK. So we had a massive focus on that, and it was great to that respect. But then it made me think there's a lot of people out there that don't have that access, and how are they surviving? And it made me find opportunities, like we don't have support group up in Aberdeen, now we do, and also to look at allowing the leave policies in companies as well. So I managed to change that over a 2-year battle with my own company, that they now afford 20 weeks full pay for kinship carers on placement of the child, which is it's a massive achievement in my respect. But for me, I'm probably still relatively humble, and I understand obviously the self-care element of that for me is kind of gone out the window, because I'm using this frustration and angers that I've had, of the lack of support that was there, and the things that are just not quite right, and probably using that to fight a bit more. And maybe that is my self-care, really, is channeling these things into doing something better, to help other people. But
that drive to change things and to improve things for other people is where you are getting your looking after yourself, because you feel that you're making a difference, and you are, and you have. And so I think that's a really interesting point.
I feel like self-care is different for some people. Sometimes you need that time out, and sometimes I think you need to be active and you need to be doing something. So it's interesting to hear the different perspectives.
Yeah.
I
And
find that if
also,
sorry.
Go ahead, Alana.
I was just saying, I just found that kind of if I was sitting on things and I was feeling that way, I'm not the only person, because I know I'm not the only person within the kinship setting or a caring setting that is sitting there with anger or frustration or upset, that don't really have an outlet for it. And it's, as we've all noted already, it's not benefiting the child if we're holding on to emotions like that.
I completely connect with that. I'm exactly the same. It's that frustration of what we've went through. Because as I say, I've been doing this for 13, 14 years now, and slowly the changes are happening, but not quick enough. And we all want it now, and obviously things don't quite happen like that. So I'm exactly the same. That drive to sort of change things a bit and get things recognised. I mean, even to the stage of, I don't know any kinship carer that gets respite. None. I don't know of any, and I'm part. You know, we've got like an online support group that, you know, I help with, and there's none. The only way to get some respite tends to be if one of the children has a disability,
Yeah.
and then it's done through a charity.
Yeah.
And it's quite a big difference to go from living your life, getting on with your work, you've got time to yourself, you've got your house, your job, and suddenly you can't work and your bills are all doubled and you don't have the same income coming in, and it makes such a huge difference to your life that you have to sort of reinvent yourself a little bit. And that's, if you can help other people to just have that little bit of support, it helps you feel better as well as them. Yeah.
Self-care to me means a bit of time to myself, which is really hard to come by. We're still working full time and having a couple of teenage boys myself, and my wee grandson. Previously I would have thought nothing more of picking up a good book and a bit of time to myself, but I kind of feel at night time the eyes aren't drooping, you're just shattered, dying to get your bed. So the time, to me, time is a big thing. I just don't seem to have any, but I'm definitely going to take on board the deep breaths when I get out of bed and see if it makes a difference, something positive.
Sarah, as you know, I work with Nurture Scotland supporting kinship carers in North Lanarkshire. Have done so for, I think it's about 8 years now, a long time. So working with the carers at the coal. Face, as they say, and listening about to how precious their time is. Time is huge, and I'm sure Alana and Lorna and Claire will agree with me. They've all said it in their own wee podcasts there. So that's a big thing. Finding that time for themselves. And you're right, Lorna, there is no respite. I've known of one, in my 8 years of working with Nurture Scotland, I've known of one kinship carer who got respite, and she was a great grandmother. So particularly elderly and a tiny wee boy, and she got a couple of weekends, I think, and that was it. So there is no respite. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so we've heard about what self-care is, and almost every one of those speakers mentioned time as a massive barrier. So we're now going to have a look at some practical suggestions for how you can fit self-care in. So I'm sure you've all heard of your 5 a day with fruit and veg, but the NHS has actually got these new recommendations for 5 ways to mental and emotional well-being. So they are connecting, being active, taking notice or being mindful, keep learning, and giving. So we're going to have a look at these in a wee bit more detail. And we want you to have a wee think about which of these on this list do you already do? Do you already fit in? And is there anything on this list that you're missing out on? So we'll go into, so the first one is connecting. So this is can help you build a self of belonging and self-worth. It gives you the opportunity to share positive experiences, allows you to provide emotional support, and allows you to sort of be supported. And as well, we've got our do's and our don'ts here, and I think we've all found out in the pandemic that technology is just not the same as stuff in real life. So if you can manage to do things in person, we definitely recommend that. So it could be something as simple as calling or texting a friend. It could be your kinship care support groups. And if you've not got a kinship care support group, as those two carers mentioned in the video, could you start one yourselves, meeting up with another kinship carer, or could you ask your local authority to set one up, the social work department? And if not that, even just setting up a regular coffee and a catch up to sort of debrief with a friend or a neighbour or a peer. It could be as simple as that. I'm going to pass over to Anne for the next one.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, this one is be active. Now, remember, some of the things, because this was put together for everybody, we want you to see, can you think, well, how would I adapt it so that it was suitable for my situation? In other words, for your situation as a kinship carer. So we know that being active is great for the brain, because there's a slide coming which shows you the chemical processes going on in the brain when you are doing some kind of aerobic exercise. In other words, an exercise that makes you breathe faster and your heartbeat faster. And all of these things are good for us, but we're not talking about a gym membership. I mean, we absolutely recognize, as much as what Lorna had said, that's A, it takes you away from the children, and B, it costs. But there's so much that you can do that doesn't fall into that category. And even the Couch to 5K takes you away from your family and your caring commitments. So we know that, for example, you can do something that might just involve going for a walk, and that is something that you can do jointly. We call it joint activity with your children and young people. And on our workshops, we've heard carers describe very eloquently what it's like to go for a walk with a young person. It's a bit like going for a drive in the car, when the young person will open up in the car. That's because you're not looking at each other. Obviously, you've got to have your eyes on the road. And so there is a sense of feeling a little bit less threatened, a little bit less under the spotlight. And if you're walking, your eyes are ahead as well. And you may have a dog with you. So that's another distraction, or even you could count the dog as a bit of pet therapy. So we're looking for things that are practical, you can build into your everyday lives. And even, and I'm thinking dancing around the kitchen even, or, you know, under lockdown, we heard of people doing, I can't remember his name, Joe, the great physical fitness chap, everybody was doing his exercises. But Sarah mentioned the support group for kinship carers, as indeed did Alana on the video. And again, we have heard through our workshops about a growing a thing that is growing in walking groups for kinship carers. So there's lots of things. And how will it benefit you? Well, it will raise your self-esteem. As it says there, it's a challenge. Can you meet this challenge? There is an expectation there, especially if you do it perhaps in tandem with somebody else. And I don't even mean physically with them. I mean, maybe just check in with them when you've done it, and because they're expecting you to do your activity, and you're expecting them to, and then you compare notes. So that's number 2 of our 5 ways. And I'm going to pass back to Sarah for the next one.
So the third one is taking notice, or this can also be thought of as being mindful or mindfulness. So that's just paying more attention to the present moment, which includes your thoughts, your feelings, your bodies, checking in with yourself and the world around you. So we heard from Lorna earlier about her just taking time to have 10 reflective breaths in the morning, ground your feet in the ground, take a deep breath, and take that time for ourselves. We've got the suggestion up here for trying free trials of apps such as Headspace or the Calm app. Could it be as simple as having no screens at the dinner table and sort of taking the time to focus on your dinner and chat with each other, linking back to the connecting. Could you go for a mindful walk, being aware of your surroundings, seeing if you can spot any wildlife, can you hear any birds? If you've got your young people, can you find any interesting leaves, any pine cones or conkers, depending on the time of year? Also remember that there's a mindfulness session this week on Thursday at 1 p.m. with Remy Boyle, where you can find out more about mindfulness and give it a go, sort of thing. We're going to try a quick technique here, where our colleague, Anna-Nice colleague Michelle, is going to take us through a different mindfulness exercise, which involves doing a task for each of the 5 senses. So I'll get that up. Sorry, I'll stop sharing to get that up. It'll just be a moment. Apologies. Just getting used to Zoom again. There we go.
This technique will use your 5 senses to remind you of the present. This is a calming technique that can help you get through tough or stressful situations or relax before starting an activity. First, take a deep belly breath to begin. 5. Look around for 5 things that you can see and say them out loud. For example, you could say, I see the computer, I see the cup, I see the picture frame. 4. Feel. Pay attention to your body and think of 4 things that you can feel and say them out loud. For example, you could say, I feel my feet warm in my socks. I feel the hair on the back of my neck. Or I feel the pillow I'm sitting on. 3. Listen. Listen for 3 sounds. It could be the sound of traffic outside, the sound of typing, or the sound of your tummy rumbling. Say the 3 things out loud. 2. Smell. Say 2 things you can smell. If you're allowed to, it's okay to move to another spot and sniff something. If you can't smell anything at the moment or you can't move, name your 2 favourite smells. 1. Taste. Say 1 thing you can taste. It may be the toothpaste from brushing your teeth or a mint from after lunch. If you can't taste anything, then say your favourite thing to taste. Take another deep belly breath to end.
Okay, so we've also mentioned that time is a barrier, and one of the things our colleague actually recommends is doing this while you wash your hair. So wash your hair mindfully, taking the time to think, what does the shampoo look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? And I think we worked out the only one you can't do is taste. But yeah, just trying to fit it into your routines that you already have. So I'll pass over to Anne for the next next 5 ways.
Thanks, Sarah. I was going to say, unless you've got strawberry shampoo or shampoo honey, I think there are shampoos that have a taste to them and they're safe to do that as well. But that was a learning thing for me, because I think up until that point, I had always thought about mindfulness as something that you did specially and separately. And so I was really blown away by the fact that you could incorporate it into your daily routine. So the next one, number 4, is keep learning. And we're not talking about a PhD in astrophysics or, I don't know, learning to do your advanced driver's exam or something really quite formal. Absolutely not. I mean, it could be something as just as simple as perhaps watching a YouTube tutorial, as it suggests there, doing something quite straightforward that you've maybe not done before. I mean, I would be very hard pushed to mend a puncture on a bicycle tire now, unless I looked at a YouTube video. Or you could ask one of your young people to help you. I mean, we know that during the lockdown one, when carers were getting used to the Zoom, particularly Zoom calls and all the different ways of, what buttons to press and so on and so forth. And we know that young people were incredibly helpful, and they came into their own, and it might even bring them out of their rooms to explain to their carers and show their carers how to do something. And of course, it puts them in the driving seat. And as it says here, it boosts their self-confidence. So children that were not coming out of their rooms, not talking, not engaging, this did. And of course, their self-esteem went up as well by so doing. So it can really give yourself an absolute boost. Oh, I can do this. I thought I couldn't, but I've discovered that I can. And of course, it helps you to connect with other people, whether it's something you're doing at home or whether it's something that you do in collaboration with other people outside the home. So comes highly recommended. And here's another cliche: every day is a school day. Have a wee look out for things that you didn't know that you're learning as you go along every day. And remember, as we go through these and as we finish, keep thinking, okay, well, how can I adapt? How can I do that in my current situation? So I'm going to pass back to Sarah for the last one now.
Yeah, so the last one is giving, but we're sure you are probably in your roles as kinship carers, you'll already be very much familiar with this one. So it creates a positive feeling and sense of reward. It gives you a feeling of purpose and self-worth and helps you connect with others. But probably what's much, much more difficult is the don't we've got over here, which is not taking on more than you can handle, or knowing when to ask for help can probably be much more challenging. And the other thing as well, we want to give a wee reminder is don't forget about yourself. Be kind to yourself too. Take a minute to treat yourself like your own best friend. And one of the examples as well we got for this one is to create you could try creating a family kindness jar. So this is where you have an old jar or box or whatever, and you write down random acts of kindness for you to do to yourself and others. So it could be making a cup of tea or hot chocolate for someone, or giving someone a hug, and you can see if you can get the whole family involved, and trying to do one a week, or whenever you feel like you need some inspiration. And we've also heard that even just remembering acts of kindness can give this same sort of positive rewarding feeling. So even just being mindful of what you're already doing, and I guess, yeah, being mindful and taking notice of all the things you're already doing to give, and recognizing those. So I'm going to pass back to Anne for a different activity. Here we go.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, this does seem on the face of it to be a different activity, but we haven't gone off piste and we haven't lost the plot. We found this on the Young Minds website, and it's how to make a self-soothe box. So if you like, it's a be kind to yourself box. It could call it a calming box. And the Young Minds website suggests that it's very helpful for children experiencing enhanced anxiety, which we know is a huge thing at the moment, and also depression. Now, it struck me when I found this that if we're talking about looking after yourself, then why could we not have such a box for you as carers? Now, it chimes perfectly with what Sarah was saying about the family kindness jar, because it's a box, boxes, jars, and also what she said about if you log these acts of kindness. So in a sense, you're putting into your self-soothe box things that either make you feel calmer or make you remember things. You probably have all heard of the concept of a memory box. Anyway, what I would like you to do here, and we're asking you to do an awful lot, and we will be bringing it back when we get to the Q&A session, is when you're listening to the young people talking about what helps them, what they've got in their self-soothe box, could you think, well, what would I put in mine? Imagine you had a box. What would be your go-to things or activities? So we're just going to, it's a very, very short couple of minute video. Thanks.
It's perfectly normal to feel a little bit more anxious, angry, sad or panicked during these times. However, there are things we can do to make us feel more calm and at peace with our situation.
One of the things that can help you with that is having a self-soothe box.
A self-soothe box is a box or a bag or a container or whatever you have that you can fill with things that might help you feel calm and help you ground yourself when you're feeling a bit panicky or anxious or stressed out or down.
The first thing I have in here is a fidget toy.
My first thing is my old Nintendo DS.
Starters, I've got this little fidget toy.
When you're feeling more anxious and stressed, sometimes it can be nice to have something to do that isn't necessarily connected to the internet.
Lavender oil. Lavender is a smell that always makes me feel calm and soothes me, so I find that if I just drop a few bits onto my clothing or my bed sheets, that it might make me feel a little bit calmer at the moment.
Sour Skittles. I find that sour sweets like Skittles or Sour Patch Kids really help sort of ground me out of panicking, so I can like just have a couple of them and then it will like calm me down from being able to focus on the strong taste.
A really cute picture of my dogs who always cheer me up.
I really like doing like hair masks, and I have a face mask here. I think it's just like a quite nice little bit of self-care to do.
Earplugs, because sometimes when you're anxious, everything can seem like a bit too much. So it's always nice to have something that can help you block out the world.
I also have some quotes that I relate to specifically, things to remind me of my inner strengths, my core values, and all of these things.
A colouring book and a little tin of colouring pencils.
We can win. Greatness lies in you. Greatness lies in all of us.
Okay. Okay, so we've looked at different activities to do with looking after yourself, and now our group of kinship carers is going to tell you about some of the benefits that they've found of self-care. So what do you think the benefits of self-care are?
For me, it makes me more in tune with myself, and it makes me more available to my kids. It definitely makes me more aware of their needs. It makes me more mindful of their needs. It makes me more emotionally present for them. That's what it means to me. Yeah, that's the benefits.
I'll just go off the back of Lorna to save asking the same question. Yeah, exactly what Lorna says there. It's being back in tune with yourself, kind of taking that step back a minute and just saying, wait a second, what am I actually doing here? What are we trying to achieve? And allow, I suppose, the children to understand you do actually have your stuff together, and that you are a dependable person, that you can also teach those things to them as well. You know, they are accountable for themselves as well.
I was just going to say, I think it's about trying to kind of rediscover me. It's trying to rediscover me, because I've spent so long being involved with a lot of legal jargon, and just know that things are kind of a bit more settled. It's trying to find me back again.
The same, getting the benefits of getting time for themselves lets them recharge the batteries, even if it's just in the group chatting, and doing the talking therapy. Yeah, it's great if they can go off for 15 minutes to do a taster, neck, back and shoulders massage or something. But because they haven't thought about themselves or their caring role during that time, they're fully recharged and reinvigorated and ready to go back and embrace their caring role, and not see it as maybe so much of a chore for a wee couple of hours, and enjoy it, because that, let's face it, that's why we're kinship carers, because we chose to do it.
I'll pass back to Anne here.
Thanks. So I think we have alluded to this business of looking after yourself and the brain. And for those of you who might still be skeptical about it, I think this slide shows this is the science. We know that when we're feeling very dysregulated and we're not in a positive place and our mental well-being is down, there are a lot of negative, the chemicals and the hormones that are associated with negative feelings are around. But here are the ones that are associated with the positive feelings. And we can, if you like, train our brain. We can blame our brain, and you saw that in previous sessions, but we can actually retrain our brain into the more positive sort of way of thinking, if you like. I mean, it's an analogy with a stroke patient who we know that the brain has a capacity to develop new and other pathways following on a stroke. Now, in a sense, what you're doing is you're with these, you're hacking the brain, you're hacking its chemical production, and you're tricking it into producing the positive chemicals. So, for example, if you're engaging in exercise, or you're dancing around the kitchen, or you're eating dark chocolate from your self-soothe box, where you put it, you're going to be releasing endorphins. And so the brain gets into this positive cycle. And it's the same for the others there that you can see that are responsible. Serotonin is the antidepressant, and dopamine is linked to the pleasure and reward cycle in the brain. But I'm going to come to the love hormone, because that's the one that we definitely need to counteract the adverse impact of cortisol, the fear hormone. So you've got oxytocin every time you hug somebody. And if there isn't a somebody, you can hug a pet. You can smile at someone, and the shortest distance between two people is a smile. And it has an amazing, just pause, just get into a mindful place when you next smile at someone. Even it doesn't need to be an intimate family member. It can be a stranger, but it has a very positive effect. And the same, Sarah talked about the kindness, the giving, the last one of the 5 ways, give a gift or a compliment, and feel that reciprocal reward, the pleasure of the person receiving and the pleasure of you from giving. And that's a cycle that is well recognized. And it goes back to the looking after yourselves first so that you can look after the young people. It's that two-way process. So one last slide, and then we're going to close with the words of the kinship carers. So back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, so bringing back, having a think about, well, what are one of these 5 ways or activities that you don't spend a lot of time on currently? Could you possibly plan it into your week? For example, could you set your alarm 5 minutes earlier to do those 10 reflective breaths Lorna talked about? Could you come off this call and text a friend to try and book a catch up? Could you download a podcast or an audiobook for you to listen to next time you're on a walk or doing things around the house? Just encouraging and asking, could you physically put something into your diary or your calendar that's just a tiny little bit of time, or a small short activity for you to do one of these things, or anything else that this webinar might have triggered. So this last slide here, we thought we'd give our group of kinship carers the last word, and by sharing their advice to other kinship carers. After today's discussion, if you had one of advice for another kinship carer, what would it be?
I would say that the main piece of advice I can give them is not to feel guilty about looking after yourself. I think quite often when we're, it's like, right, okay, I'm not doing this just now. I'm going to go for a walk, or you know what, I'm going to go and get my nails done. We automatically think, but I could have had that time doing this for the children, or I should have spent that money doing this for the children, or I should have missed my doctor's appointment and gone to that children's meeting. But we need to have a time when we put us first so that we can be the best carers that we can be. So if you've got a couple of £1 extra a week, save it up until you've got enough for a babysitter for a night. If you can get to the support group so you can have a rant and a rave, go. If you can manage to do anything that is about recharging your batteries and just giving you a little bit of time when you're not a carer. You're not a carer, you're just you. And don't feel guilty about it. You need it. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Lorna always says it so beautifully. she just hits a nail on the head, really. I think kind of following on from that, it's taking the time, make the time, because you can feel guilty about it, but it's actually doing it as well. I think we really do need to take that minute, that 5 minutes, that half hour, whatever it is that is needed to kind of get you back to earth, like that we actually prioritize taking the time for it, if obviously in the means that we can take the priority of that. we're not naive to know we do have children in our care. Their needs do come first, but we do need to actually take some time, and as often as we need it at the end of the day. So, and also probably another thing as well is to push maybe for what's right. If you don't think you have that support there, or you don't have a support group in the area, find what kind of information that you can find out. Obviously, we've got plenty of advocates out there, from KCAS to yourselves as well, that could help support kind of creating something of your own. And I've known fantastic kinship carers through my own kinship journey who have kind of taken it against the norm of, like, as we were talking earlier, we don't have anything up north here, or we didn't have for a long time, and it just took that one kinship carer who was like, enough's enough, we need this, people need to have that rant and rave. So if you're worried about not having that, then there's always going to be support out there to help.
I'm going to take for today and defo start the getting out of bed and putting my feet on the floor and taking 10 deep breaths as a start.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a great start, Claire. And there are proven benefits to taking time out for ourselves, even if it is only 3 minutes with your feet on the ground and breathing before you start your day. Absolutely, and I would advocate that to everyone now. Thank you, Lorna, for that.
I'll be doing it too.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with the benefits. 3 minutes a day, job done.
But I think we've been the ones who've learned so much from today, and just to say an enormous thank you to you for your wisdom, for your insight, for your perseverance, and as Alana said, for your resilience, and listening to the journeys from where you started and what you realized you needed and how you made that happen.